Complexity can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, complexity can be really good in the sense that it can get people thinking about how to best achieve something. To sit there and actually tinker and toy with things can be a great source of entertainment for a lot of people. On the other hand, complexity can sometimes be a bad thing as well, especially if it comes across as off-putting. If there's too much stuff going on, people can find it almost painful to try and figure all of that stuff out and just ultimately fall apart at the seams. Fitting a ship in EVE Online can be both of those things at once. Some people absolutely adore it, other people absolutely hate it. So, in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing to you how the fitting screen works and try and unravel it so that it's not as much of a headache for new players. Ahoy there folks, I'm Captain Benzie and welcome to another Catskull Academy lesson. If you do have any questions about this video, please drop them in the comment section down below. I will do my best to answer as many as I can, and I do encourage other players to answer and respond as well so that we can get a community going. And speaking of community, make sure you come and join us on the Catskull Discord, linked in the description of this video as well. Be more than happy to help there. There's a whole community of people desperate to sort of give you the best advice they can to help you on your journey into New Eden. Otherwise, let's jump right in. So before we can familiarize ourselves with the fitting screen, of course, we need to open it first. So we come across to the Neocom here on the left-hand side, and we look for this icon, this one that looks like a rifter in a segmented circle. Now, you can click this to open it, or you could use the displayed keyboard shortcut of Alt-F. Those keyboard shortcuts can be changed in the settings. Because fitting's only really used in a station, I'm quite happy just clicking it. I don't see the purpose of going anything too deep into that. This will then open up the fitting window, and this is quite a complex little beast, and that's why we're doing a whole lesson on it today. Now, we're going to go over everything from what all of these squares and symbols mean around the side, what these bars are all over the place, and what this information on the right-hand side means. Don't worry too much about the actual fit and the modules itself. I will be doing a video on fitting thrashes and stuff in future, but hey, this is just a good example to look at the fitting screen and see how it all works. First of all then, here in the top left we have this toggle between equipment and personalization. Now if you click on personalization, this is just the screen where you can change what skin you're using on your particular vessel, or things like Alliance and Corporation emblems. We're not going to worry about that for this video. Those are purely aesthetic, they just change how your ship looks, not how it works, so they're not at all important to this lesson. Coming back across to the equipment screen, on the top left still as well, we also have this little eye icon, which if you mouse over it, will just remind you of what bonuses your current ship has, but various different skill bonuses. Here on the Thrasher, you can see that this gets bonuses from Minmatar Destroyer that will increase small projectile turret damage and small projectile turret tracking speed. Therefore, we can infer that we probably should be fitting small projectile turrets onto this. We also have a roll bonus for small projectile turrets as well, or everything here says this ship uses small projectile turrets. If we were to look at something like the Breacher as a counterexample, that has bonuses to light missiles and rockets and shield boosters, so that kind of infers that that ship should include those modules somewhere in its fitting, right? But then where do these actually go? Well, that's what all these slots around here are for, and slots are divided into 4 categories. High power slots along the top, medium power slots along the side here, and low power slots along the bottom. We then have rig slots at the top left, and we'll talk about those ones last. We'll start with the high power slots first of all. Now, high power slots are traditionally used for things like weaponry, probe launchers, energy transfers like the Nosferatu and neutralizers. Those are all high slots. And you'll see that here on the Thrasher, we actually have 8 high slot modules available. High slots are available there to fit 8 modules. But we also have these little circles here and here. These are hard points. If we mouse over this, you can see that of the 8 high slots available on a Thrasher, 7 of them are turret hard points. This means only 7 of those 8 high slots can be dedicated to turrets. If you wanted to put 8 turrets on here, you're out of luck. It is not possible. We cannot fit an 8th turret on here because there are only 7 turret hard points. In this case, we also have one launcher hardpoint. Now, this could be a missile launcher for a little bit of extra damage. We could also fit something like a probe launcher onto here if we wanted to use this for scanning and finding various different sites and things. Otherwise, we can just ignore that it's a launcher, and we could put something like an energy neutralizer, a Nosferatu, or a salvager in here. Those don't care whether it's a turret's hardpoint or a launcher hardpoint. You can just fit those in. Same with things like prototype cloaks and that on various different ships as well. Ultimately, in this case, we can see, because we've got a situation where everything is bonusing for small projectile turrets, and of the 8 high slots, 7 of them are turret hardpoints, it's pretty obvious that we should be using those various small projectile turrets in there to get the most out of this vessel. You'll see I've left that 7th slot, that 8th slot there empty. Again, I could fit something like a salvager into here, so let's click on this and it will bring open this little tab on the side. I can now go up and down my list of various different modules and what I have available. Let's actually go to the inventory version because this just makes things a little bit easier. We're going to click on this one for high slots, showing what is available in my inventory. You can see here that if I wanted to put a missile launcher like this in, I can drag that in, but oh no, it's not going to fit, and we'll talk more about that later on, so we're going to unfit the module for the time being. If I wanted to, I could come down further. Do I have a salvager? No, I don't, but I could put a probe launcher in there, right? Because that uses a launcher. Oh, again, we don't have enough space to fit it. Again, we'll talk about that more later. I just wanted to showcase why sometimes various different slots are left open on a ship. And this toggle is very useful, by the way. If you click on an empty slot, it will change the settings here to show what's in your inventory. So if you have a particular home system, a home station that you're based at, you can just open this up and easily navigate through. And if we click on the different slots around, like if I were to unfit this small clarity ward for a moment, I can click on this particular slot here, and you'll see it's now changed to my medium power slots. And I just need to find that small clarity ward, and we can drag that one back in. That brings us nicely then to the medium slot modules. Medium power slots are things like shield tanking, so things like shield boosters or shield resistance increases like shield hardeners. It's also where your propulsion modules go, afterburners and micro warp drives. It's where a lot of your electronic warfare and propulsion jamming will go, so things like stasis weatherfires, warp disruptors, those will come in here as well, alongside batteries and chargers and stuff like that. Remember, of course, that Nosferatus and neutralizers are still high slot modules. If we were to go here, you'll see that that's where the neutralizers and Nosferatus would be if I had any. The medium power slots are your shield tank, your propulsion, and things like tackle modules, which gives you a little bit of like choice as to what you're doing there. We've got 3 of those here on the Slasher. Your low power slots then are, if I come across here, I can show you some more here. This is where your armor tanking modules go. For starters, whether it's armor repairers, armor resistance modules, that kind of thing. Damage control is a popular one in low slots. Weapon upgrade modules like gyro stabilizers, heat sinks, ballistic control units, those will go into the low slots as well, alongside inertial stabilizers and things like nanofiber, internal structures as well. Stuff that modifies your ship often goes in the low slots here. You can also use this information to figure what kind of ship you're flying. Now, obviously here you can see we've got a lot of high slots, and we know that those are turret hardpoints, and the ship itself gets bonuses to small projectile turrets, so we know that this ship should be fitted with those. But should it be a shield tank or an armor tank? Well, considering armor tanking modules go in the low slots and shield tanking goes in the mid slots, you can kind of see that here we've only got 2 slots to fit armor tanking, whereas we've got theoretically 3 to go with shield tanking. So that could infer that we're more likely to go shield tanking on this particular one because we don't have bonuses. Again, if we were to look at the Breacher does have a direct bonus to shield tanking, which suggests you should probably shield tank it, right? We can also see, though, that because we're not really using this as a tackle ship, we don't need to have things like tackle modules here in the mid slots. We want a propulsion modifier, but then that's going to leave us with 2 shield slots left. So we could theoretically shield tank it or armor tank it because there's only 2 slots left. But considering the low slots, we kind of want to get that additional firepower. We may as well just go for the shield, right? It's not a hard and fast rule by any means, but it does give you a bit of an informed guess as to what things may be. So if we were looking, for example, at a ship that had 2 mid slots and 4 low slots, Chances are that's going to be an armor tank vessel, because you've only got 2 mid slots, 2 shield tanking modules at most, whereas you could theoretically have 4 armor tanking modules in those low slots. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it does give you an indicator. Now, why couldn't I fit an additional thing in here? Why can't I put another module in here, right? If I try to equip that, oh no, it says that I don't have enough CPU. Well, what on earth is CPU? CPU is this bar here. We also have a red one beneath it called Power Grid. And every module that you try to fit, if we, for example, take a look at this particular one here, is going to have a certain amount of CPU usage and a certain amount of power grid usage. And every ship that you have in EVE Online will have certain amounts of maximum CPU and maximum power grid. You cannot exceed those, right? You cannot have more modules on your ship than your power grid can sustain. You cannot have more modules on your ship than your CPU can sustain. And so you will need to bear this in mind. This is why I've got this empty slot here, because I don't have anything that's worth putting in here that doesn't take me over on CPU or power grid. This is a way to physically restrain you. It's also a way to make sure that you don't just fit the biggest modules possible. Why would I use a small clarity ward enforcing shield booster if I could put a medium one in there, right? Well, yeah, there are times when you will oversize modules in the game. If you've got enough CPU and power grid left over to fit a medium shield booster or shield extender or something that would normally go on a cruiser, then yeah, you can fit that in there. That's why you'll find that destroyers and frigates have a lot lower CPU and a lot lower power grid than cruisers or battleships. Because those ships have the bigger power grid and the bigger CPU, they can fit those bigger modules. If you were to compare a small shield booster to a large shield booster, you'll see that obviously a large shield booster is flat out better than a small shield booster. It boosts more of your shields. It's a bigger module that does more, but it also consumes a lot of power, and therefore you cannot fit it to the small ships because they simply don't have the power grid or the CPU to support it. It's just a limiting factor, something that is worth bearing in mind as you're putting modules into your ship and having a look around, seeing how it affects. It's also worth noting that if you mouse over the different modules on your ship, you can actually see how much power grid and CPU they consume. Like here, the small clarity ward, it doesn't use much power grid at all, but it uses quite a bit of CPU. Whereas the monopropellant enduring afterburner here uses a little bit of CPU, but a decent amount of power grid. Again here, the enduring multi-spectrum shield hardener, there's a lot of CPU usage going on there, barely any power grid. And you can kind of just look around and see how this all works. Like the weapons, being projectile turrets, weapons don't use much CPU at all, but they do use a decent amount of power grid to fit, which again stops me fitting medium turrets onto this ship, because they're going to just chew through the power grid way too fast. Ultimately, that's your high slots, mid slots, and low slots. We've talked about the hard points and how those work. We then have rigs. Now, rigs aren't just straight up slots in EVE Online. You don't just fill all 3 of these at any time, because you also have your calibration here, which is a fitting resource for rigs. This is why I'm only using small projectile burst aerator 1, a small capacitor control circuit 1 in each of these, and not their 2s, or using medium ones and so on and so forth, because I only have a certain amount of calibration. This is kind of like power grid and CPU, but exclusively for rigs. So some of my other ships, for example, may only have 2 rigs actually in those slots, because those 2 rigs use up my full calibration, and I cannot fit a 3rd one in. This again just gives you a bit of an option of how to kind of put everything into position and have a look at it. And you might be thinking, okay, this is getting pretty complex, and especially with rigs, I don't want to put rigs in and find that I can't actually then use them and I have to destroy them when I take them out, right? That's why you have the simulate button here. When you simulate, you can actually even take rigs out completely. We can open up the rigs and see if there are any other rigs that I can drop in here as an example. Yeah, so small gravity, let's put that in there. Let's get rid of these 2 temporarily, and you can see that I can play around with the fitting. So if I put 2 of these gravity units in there, oh no, I can't then put the small projectile one in because it's going to go over. You can see I've got a red little exclamation mark here saying that I'm completely overloaded, and as are my rigs. And I've moved all these around, and those would be destroyed normally, but if I just exit the simulation, there we are, I'm about to exit simulation. Any progress you've made on your currently simulated ship will be lost. Am I sure? Yes. And we go right back to how it was fitted before. This allows you to actually play around with what modules you want to put in and see if they'll fit within the power grid and CPU, make sure your slots are all working, this kind of thing. And we can also have a look at like our capacitor here and see how this runs. Like here you can see that with everything on this ship operational, our capacitor is going to deplete in 5 minutes 15, but chances are I'm not going to have everything running at all times. So for example, I can actually turn off the small clarity ward here, and this is now how my ship looks if I'm not using the shield booster. If the shield booster is switched off, we are now capacitor stable. As soon as I turn the shield booster on in combat, I've got 5 minutes 15 of total power. But again, that is also with the afterburner running. So what if I turn the afterburner off? I'm completely stable, but then if I activate the shield booster, oh, I'm stable. So I can actually run either the shield booster or the afterburner and still maintain full capacitor stability. That's a really useful tool to play with, just to give you an idea of how that all works. Now, to run down the sides here of the screen and explain what all this means, we've already looked at the capacitor here, and remember that is based on everything being currently operational. We then have a fence, and why is my fence at 0 DPS? Because I've got 7 turrets in here, right? Well, that's because I haven't put ammunition in. So let's do that very quickly and showcase how this works. If I open up this particular vessel, let's go for Fusion S. We're going to drag this in to all of these turrets here, and this will then give us a DPS reading of how this all works. We can load this like this. Obviously it's faster to undock and just hit the reload all, but you can't do that when you're in a station. You have to undock to do it. Now we can see 184.7 DPS is our damage per second there. That's with the without the reload time included. Once this, so this is how much DPS we will do until we have to reload. When we reload, our DPS is now suddenly dropped down to this because of reload time. For a longer fight, this is kind of the more important one. If you're going to have to reload your turrets at least once, that is your actual effective DPS, and that's worth mentioning, worth taking into consideration. Essentially, because I've got so many charges before I have to reload, as long as the fight ends before I have to reload, I'll be at 184.7 DPS. As soon as the fight is long enough that I have to reload at least once, that is my effective overall DPS. And you can see here what your alpha strike damage. This is really key. Now, ultimately, this means that with this particular ship, if I activate all of my turrets at one go, I am going to do 1,235 hit points worth of damage in that one shot before I have to shoot again. The total DPS, obviously, is damage per second. This is just my damage per shot that I'm getting here. Now, if that's enough to kill someone, I kill them in one hit, right? That's how you get what are referred to as alpha strike builds. Defenses you can see next. You can see your shield, your armor, and your structure shown here with their resistances as well, so you can see how much you're actually getting from those. And if we go into the simulator, again, we can see what that's like with the shield hardener switched on. You see that's gone right up. If we were to turn the shield hardener off completely, you see this drops all the way down to here. So let's put it back on, and boom! There go those resistances. Nice and easy. We can see that, how that all works with the simulator. Targeting, we can see what the range of my targeting is, because ships in EVE Online do have a lock range. That means if a ship is sitting at 32.41 kilometers, I can't lock on. If I'm locked onto them and they move that far away, I will lose my lock on. If a ship's sitting at 60 kilometers, I can't lock onto it. They must be at 32.4 kilometers or closer for me to lock on. I can see here my radar sensor strength. This is to do with electronic countermeasures. We won't go into that for this video. We can see our scan resolution. The better this number is, then the faster you lock onto enemies. We have our own signature radius. The smaller this is, the longer they take to lock onto you. And then we have maximum locked target. So you can see I can have up to 6 targets locked. I'm going to lock fairly quickly, and being quite a small ship, it takes a while for bigger things to lock onto me. All very useful information to learn there, especially if you are new to EVE Online coming from, say, EVE Echoes. That maximum targeting range is one that you need to pay a lot of attention to. Don't ignore that. We then have navigation. Navigation shows us our maximum velocity. This again is as is with the ship just the way it is. If I go back into simulator and now I've got the enduring afterburner on, you can see that's shot right up because that's now showing us how fast we're going with the afterburner active. If I turn the afterburner off by clicking it, you can see we drop all the way back down to our previous amount. Let's come out of the simulator. So that's our basic speed, but you've seen how to figure that out when it comes to actually using the simulator to activate the afterburner. We then have our mass. This is used in agility calculations. It's about how your inertia works. The higher your mass, then the longer it takes you to actually speed up and reach top speed, or slow down and get back to a near zero speed. We have our inertia modifier. These two things added together, multiplied together, are what give you actual agility rating. So you can have a higher mass, but then a better inertia modifier or a worse inertia modifier that will actually change things around there. This just gives you, these are the two things that calculate together to give you your align time. And it says align time is the time to end to warp from a full stop. 4.57 seconds is actually 5 seconds. Until you hit the exact zero, you are always rounding up to the next second. So even if I got this down all the way to 4.01, it is still going to take me 5 seconds to warp due to how server ticks work. And I have done a full video on how those work elsewhere on this channel. But just note that if you want to be warping faster, you do need to reach the next absolute value. So until this reaches 4.00, then I'm going to be warping on a 5-second tick. Whereas if I take it down to 4.00 or 3.2, for example, those are both warping on the 4-second ticks. We then have our top warp speed, 4.5 astronomical units per second. This is just the top speed that you reach while warping. Obviously, the larger this number, the faster you can move around space. Then we have the drone page. This particular ship doesn't really use drones, so I've got 0 DPS for these. You can see I have 0 megabits per second of bandwidth. This is part of fitting drones. I will do a whole separate video on drone usage that will go into this in more depth, but this is kind of like power grid for drones. You can only have so many drones out at a time based on your ship's bandwidth. And again, we have a drone control range, in this case 52 kilometers. This is kind of like your maximum lock range or your weapon range. It's how far those drones can actually move away from your vessel. Obviously, we do have the kind of difficulty that I can only lock 32.4, so it doesn't matter that my drones can go to 52 kilometers, they can technically only go to 32.4. And you can see I have 0 active drones, the ability to manage drones there. Again, I'll do that in a separate video. We can see our full value here of what the ship is going to actually cost. Oh, good, we're getting the cluster shut down. Oh well, I've got plenty of time. This allows you to estimate the actual value of your ship. This means you can do a bit of a risk analysis on whether or not it's worth taking this ship into a risky situation. Do you have enough ISK to replace this if it gets destroyed? 5.2 million ISK isn't too bad. Yes, I've got enough ISK to deal with that. I can also have a look at the power grid here. I can look at the CPU, and you can see as actual values how that works without having to sort of mouse over here. Useful information, same as we have the cargo hold. We can see this ship has a 400 cubic meter cargo hold, of which I'm currently using 9.7, and then the drone bay is shown underneath there as well. There's really not that much to the fitting screen once you get your head around it. There's just a lot of information going on, and yes, you can use these toggles to bring that in and out. It's fairly simple to understand once you get your head around it. It's just a lot of information visible. Finally, once you've got a fit that you like, you'll see that it actually comes up here. You can actually drag this into chat to share with people, show off, or ask questions. And that is honestly well worth doing. If you ever see anything written in orange in chat, it usually means you can click on it. Anyway, folks, I hope this has given you some help and understanding in how the fitting grid works in EVE Online. Now, again, if you're coming from EVE Echoes, just be aware of the slot differences, that your neutralizers and Nosferatus are now in high slots, that shield and propulsion are now in mid slots, and there's a lot more different modules available to you if you're used to playing Echoes. Rigs, again, not only do you have a limited number of slots, but you also have your calibration, which is worth noting, and this amazing simulate function that allows you to play around with things and see how it works if it's switched on, if it's overheated, and we'll talk about overheating in a fully separate video, or if it's just sitting on your ship but not active. You can see how that affects capacitor, how that affects things like your navigation with having this on. So if I have there on not switched on, 4.5 second warp, 337.5 meters per second top speed. If I activate that in during afterburner, you can see that because of the additional mass that now applies, I have a longer align time and I have a maximum velocity increase as well. So you can actually see how those modules affect your ship essentially in real time, how it would be in the field without having to undock and actually do it. Anyway, folks, hopefully this has been helpful. If you do have any questions, please ask in the comment section down below or come join the Catskull Discord. Myself and my community will be more than happy to answer as many questions as we can. We want to get people playing this game, working together and having a great time. And if you think I've missed something or there's something that's worth clarifying or explaining, drop that in the comment section as well for other people to read through. It all helps at the end of the day. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this one right the way through to the end, folks. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!